Hello, my name is Ellie Downing and I'm presenting on the lands and waterways that have been cared for by the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation for tens of thousands of years. I acknowledge the traditional caretakers for the lands and waterways where you're working from. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are our first scientists and they've been caring for country for more than 60,000 years. I'm presenting to you today as part of the Science Communication Outreach and Participation Research Group, and we're based at the University of Sydney. We're a team of multidisciplinary research students and postdocs and academics who combine all of our experiences to look at, as our name suggests, scope. Please feel free to reach out to me on my GitHub or on my Twitter. My username is on screen and will be up again at the end of my presentation. You'll notice some slides have a little GitHub cat silhouette on it, which means that it's something that I've written about on GitHub if you're interested to learn a little bit more. To give you a background on who I am and what I can offer you, I'm a museologist and I'm also a science communicator, and I'm an academic and practitioner for both. I have 2 master's degrees in museum studies, with my research master's focused on experiences and expectations of citizen science within a museum space. I've worked for museums on science festivals and in science education for many years, and I now work part-time for state government as a science communicator while I do this PhD part-time. Consistent in my research is a really strong focus on how to foster positive identity formation within the context of a scientific experience. And I also look at how to integrate bodies of knowledge to strengthen science communication practices and outputs and impact. And at the core of all of this is a really deep interest on how to help link communities with science and help them feel safe enough to continue to engage with science, building a more scientifically literate community. And it's this community building that links my experience as a museologist with my goals as a science communicator. So what is museology and what do museologists like me do? Simply put, it's the study of museums, but this definition doesn't really tell you very much about what museology does and how it relates to other fields. Better question, I think, is to think about what the function of a museum is. So back in 2018, Sharman Solberg built on some previous work to establish these 9 meta functions to try and capture why and how a museum functions. Taking a step back, what's apparent when you look at these 9 meta functions is that museums are inherently multidisciplinary spaces where practices are combined and they evolve to complement other goals and approaches. This underlying capacity of a museum to create new practices based on a variety of stakeholder needs is something that I look at. I also look at how the stakeholder-centric approach relates to the roles and responsibilities that a museum has to its communities. So if you combine these things, the big picture, that thing that I look at is how museums adapt and evolve to stay relevant and central to their communities. Thinking about contemporary science and the issues being faced, the relationship between science and society is the thing that I think museology can help the most with. So if I can lift my research on how museums stay relevant and connected to communities and transplant it into science, then I can start to find ways to build communities centered around science. And the benefits of that, I think, are going to be tenfold. So how do we do it? I want you to think about your answer to 3 of the following questions to start answering this question. How is this squid different to you? How is this squid the same as you? How are you going to find out? And a very cheeky 4th, is there a wrong answer to any of these questions? The point of all of this is that it's a lot easier to understand what museological education theory is all about when you compare it to a more traditional curriculum. So in a positivist curriculum, evidence-based methods and scientific verification are prioritized. It's often about taking somebody on a delineated information path with a goal of getting to the end knowledge point. So squids have a donut brain. Museology, on the other hand, it prioritizes the experiential. Knowledge creation doesn't have a fixed trajectory. Instead, it focuses on how individuals and communities interact and embody and relate to and prioritize information. What do you notice about the squid? These two approaches are complementary and often coexist. So museology isn't offering something new per se, but rather it's another discipline that is filled with existing practices that you can incorporate into your own practice to strengthen the impact of your educational work. Today, I'm briefly talking about three museological education theories to start showing you how museology can support science communication and education practice. The first one is called flow, sometimes called state of flow. And as described by everyone's mate Mihail Csikszentmihalyi, it's the metaphor that many people have used to describe their sense of effortless action they feel in moments that stand out as being the best in their lives. So it's that glorious moment where it all comes together for a learner and they just get it and they feel really good. Museum education theory looks at how to construct an environment that really prioritizes flow and wants to do this as a way to tap into the intrinsic motivation people have to engage and to learn. So there are 4 steps to create an environment that is conducive to flow, and they are to set a defined goal, to make sure that it's challenging but still achievable, give feedback to the learner throughout the process, but make sure that you do it in a way that creates a safe and supportive environment. So the goal of everything is to support somebody as they work out their own solution, rather than make them follow a delineated path to knowledge. And the value of being able to create flow like this is that the educational environment that you've constructed, there will be elements in that that become linked to the experience of positive identity formation. So what that means is if somebody experiences flow when they're engaging with science, science becomes a positive stimuli for them that they associate with their own self-confidence and other really good feelings. The experience of flow is significant because it indicates that there's potential to start building community, and that you can create community and increase engagement with community through science. So I mentioned the educational environment being important to facilitating flow. And what I mean by this is the framework for understanding that you communicate as you educate. So as a museum science educator, I often use narrative framework to increase the potential for people to find meaning in what we're doing. The narrative framework is one through which somebody interprets and understands and notes the significance of experience and information to form a sense of identity that is responsive to both themselves, to other people, and to external stimuli. So the narrative allows for multiple interpretations and understandings to exist simultaneously and equally. The framework creates potential for more meaning making to occur by creating a space for different engagement motivations. It allows for social learning and encourages participation through that. It encourages alternative interpretations of information and how that is expressed, and also has an added benefit of increasing transparency of industries by revealing the processes and approaches to problem solving and knowledge inquiry. While it's really helpful to achieve a delineated outcome, the end educational point isn't the only goal of a narrative framework. People feeling like they did something really significant and feeling like they want to come back again and engage again is the purpose. So in a museum, information displayed within the museum can often be understood to be quite authoritative to a visitor. And this is true of science as well. For those who don't get, science is kind of this big, hot rolling conversation of current accepted theory. Science has a near impenetrable authority, and this is where narrative can help as well. Through narrative, you can link individual stories together and create shared experiences and start building a community. It creates this space where people are encouraged to create their own individual identity in relation to their knowledge and to other people and that shared experience that you facilitate. And in this way, you can start to break down preconceptions of authority that might have made people feel unsafe or unwelcomed, and instead reveal the potential for them to be part of a scientific community. Underlying the other 2 approaches I mentioned, flow and narrative, is a third: the need for empathetic understanding of the people you're engaging with. The Empathetic Museum, and their website's on my slide, is a collaboration of professionals formed in 2014, and they offer a really great articulation of why empathy is so important. So they argue that a museum or science must examine its relationship to social issues in order to grow and engage with communities that aren't in the field. This call to action is stemmed in the white privilege and norms that museums uphold and propagate. So the thrust of the argument is that museums won't be able to connect and resonate with non-white people if these people don't feel seen and safe in the space. This is also really true for science and tertiary education. So while science and tertiary education don't have the same cultural role as a museum, they have both played a role in the establishment of colonial power. So to start to understand the differences of experiences people might have in relation to science, you need to start engaging with them from an empathetic standpoint. The collective built stage steps to help you become more empathetic, called the maturity model. It starts by asking you to increase your awareness and understanding of other people's experiences. It then asks you to go out and engage with people, ask them how they want to engage with science, and really spend time listening rather than assuming that you know what this will be. You then need to take this information and start really accepting the historic systemic oppression that has been proliferated and normalized through science, hear what people have said and understand why they have said that, so that you can take the final step, which is to take action and start changing every level of science and honestly appraising your own practices. In tandem to these steps are the principles of authenticity, empathy at every level, so not just one person or one action, but across your entire practice, and commitment to creating it as a sustainable practice. The end goal of all of this is that individuals and staff and organisations understand more about the issues faced within their local community and the communities that they engage with. And through this understanding, you can start shifting and changing the space to accommodate more people who previously couldn't see how they could fit in or didn't feel safe enough to engage. And the result is that you are creating a culture that allows for many different experiences, and you can celebrate and uplift people to create a stronger and more diverse field. And by continuously cycling through this maturity model, you can stay relevant to contemporary communities. A lot of what I research might sound quite big and abstract, but it can kind of be boiled down to approaching science the same way that you would approach cultural research. So think about science as a socio-political construct that people have created and consume. So you can look at who is and isn't involved in the construction of it to start understanding more about scientific culture. Through this lens, reasons why people may or may not be engaging with science become a lot easier to understand. And the good news is that most of the heavy lifting in terms of working out what to do next has been done by museologists before me. You can use empathy to understand more about who you're engaging with and how their experience may influence their engagement with science. Narrative framework allows you to create an environment where learning is based on affirmation of what somebody knows and brings to the topic, rather than just judging adherence to a binary right or wrong answer. And Flow helps structure these learning experiences in such a way that people feel really good about themselves and what they're learning and the community that they're engaging with, so they come back again. Thinking back to our Squiddy Buddy and the 4 questions I asked you, it becomes a little bit easier to explain what I'm trying to achieve for science communication through my research. The thing I want to get across most is that museology has a lot to offer to help you think about your audience and your own work in a new way. It can help you and the people that you're talking with think outside disciplinary frameworks, and it increases the circle of confidence that encompasses new ideas and methods and approaches. It's a toolkit for science educators to create points of connection with science and think about the impact and relevancy of science in a new way, so that you can hook in new audiences and get existing audiences to think differently. If we can achieve this, the bigger challenges we face, like climate change and pandemics and resource management, become a little bit easier to tackle, because we don't have to fight to establish the relevancy and value of science each time. References for this talk are on my GitHub, along with some writings about my research, and my email is also on screen if you want to get in contact. Hilariously, for a talk focused on listening and co-designed education, you haven't had a chance to speak, so I highly encourage you to get involved during the Q&A. Otherwise, I hope you have a great conference.